Hi guys, it's Riley, and I know I haven't been the most active on here in a hot minute, but I've decided to come on for the end of the year to show you my least favorite books that I read in 2020. If you do want to see more of me, then I have a book talk account, which is the same username as this. We're almost at 3K, which is absolutely insane. So that's where I am mostly now. So the way that I'm going to be ranking these books is probably starting off with number 1 being the worst, like my absolute least favorite book I read this year, and then I'll end off with the one that was still not my favorite, but it wasn't like horrible, if that makes sense. So number 1 I don't actually have with me because we read it for school, and it was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and I know that's kind of like a classic and like teachers are like, oh, it's timeless, but I was just absolutely not a fan for it. Like, no, it was slow, I couldn't get into it, and yeah, there was adventures, like it says in the title, and there was a general, like there was a good backbone for a plot, but it just wasn't interesting, and I'm just not a huge fan of classics, especially ones that school recommends. That one was a book that I didn't have any choice in reading because, you know, I had to read it for school. So, meh. My most disappointing read was probably Cinderella is Dead. I was super excited to get into this book because it was a sapphic fairy tale retelling, and I'm all about fairy tale retellings, especially this year. I read so many of them, so I was really excited because this was Cinderella is like such a traditional fairy tale, so I was really excited to see how the author was able to break that down and get it into something new, especially with that added factor of diversity, which is super important. But I think my expectations were just really high, and that's ultimately why I was let down. I liked the general idea of it. I just feel like there could have been a bit more to the world and the characters, because there was just something missing, and I felt like the end plot was just kind of predictable, and I just wasn't a huge fan of it. And I do have Goodreads, which I've been using, so I actually ranked this one a 3 out of 5 stars, but it was more of a 2-star read for me. But I only ranked it 3 stars because I just felt like the general message was really good, and like how you should always stay true to yourself and like speak up if you want your voice to be heard and like have change for injustices. So I felt like that was a really good, important, like underlying message. But as for the plot, I was just not a fan. But I also know a lot of people that loved it, so I guess it's just to your own opinion. Coming up with number 3. So it's The Heir and The Crown, but I mostly want to focus on The Heir because if you don't know, these are the 2 books that follow after this selection, like original trilogy with Maxon in America. And the main character is Adlin, who is next in line for the throne in Aaliyah, so she's royalty, and oh my gosh, she was so obnoxious. I've tried to get through this book twice, and I just haven't managed to get through the first, I don't even think I've made it past the first 50 pages before because of just how obnoxious my main character she was. But I finally pushed myself to read it this summer, and I made it through this book, and then I followed with this book, and this book could have been better. Gonna be completely honest, it could have been a lot better. Maybe just making her more likable main character, but at the same time, I feel like she didn't have good character development in The Crown. Would I ever reread these books? Probably not. But I don't know. It was just that sort of like an okay series. Like, yeah, her character development was really good, but like there was just really no chemistry between her and any of the suitors, and like, again, it's sort of predictable, and I just was not a fan. Okay, and then the last book I don't actually have with me, but it was the first book of the Truly Devious series. As a whole, though, I really enjoyed the series. The other 2 books were really good, and the general plot was so, like, plot twisty, and, like, there was a lot that went on, and I'm really excited for the 4th book that's coming out in April, I believe. But the first one, I also had very high expectations, and when I went into it, I was just not... I feel like some bits were a little slow, and they over-explained some aspects of Ellingham Academy. But if they really wanted to extend the series out, like, I feel like they could have put some of the information into some of the other books. But I do agree that it did start off with a strong foundation for like what this school was and like how its past was sort of rickety. So I feel like some bits were slow, while other parts were just sort of like rushed, and like there was like loose ends almost. But overall I did enjoy the series. I just think the first one, it could have been a bit better. And this one I actually wasn't going to include, but I might as well just put it in. I gave this book 4 stars. Dumplin', it was made into a movie. I actually really enjoyed it. But it was on like as far as like enjoyment of books goes, it was a bit on the lower end. Like it wasn't as up there as like Red, White, and Royal Blue, but this one was just a little bit closer to the end because some bits of it were slow and like, I don't know, it just stressed me out because she was like dating almost like two guys at once and she was having like problems with her best friend and her mom wasn't there, and I don't know, it just like stressed me out a lot. But it was a really good book, especially once we got into the middle of the plot when she kind of befriended like some of her new friends at school, and then she sort of like discovered who she wanted to be, and like and she was comfortable in her own body, which I feel like was super important. And of course I love Dolly Parton, so I loved the little Easter eggs of her that were hidden in there too. With that being said though, I probably won't read Puddin', which is the sequel, and I don't even think the main character Willa Dean is in that. I think the main character is Millie Mitchell-Chuck. And then lastly, I'm going to show books that I DNF'd, which if you don't know what that means, that basically is like a verb for did not finish. So here they are. So my first book that I DNF'd at the very beginning of 2020, like right when quarantine and all that hit, I think it was maybe at the beginning of March is when I started reading it, but it's this it's the Modern Book of Fairy Tales by Holly Black. It has 3 books combined into one, that's why it's like absolutely ginormous. But I stopped sort of in the middle of Teeth, which is the first one, or Tithe, however you pronounce it, just because I don't know, I wasn't feeling it. There are some characters that were in the Cruel Prince trilogy, which I would like to see because they were like familiar faces, but like I don't know, I was just getting really distracted, and it was right around this time that Chain of Gold came out, so I ditched this for Chain of Gold. Oops. But yeah, I will definitely probably pick this back up because it wasn't a bad book or anything, and I'll definitely get back to it. I just don't know when because my TBR is very long at the moment. And then secondly, the second book that I DNF'd, and I think this is like the only other one that I just did not finish, that I started, is The Betrothed, also by Kira Cass, through the Selection series. I just was not feeling it, especially after reading The Heir and the Crown, which are just sort of mediocre at best. And this one, going into it, like it has that same aspect of royalty and like I don't know, it was just really slow for me, and one of the characters, I didn't even get that far in. I only got like maybe less than 50 pages in, but like just feeling it out, I was not a fan of any of the characters, and the plot just really did not seem to be going anywhere, and it was sort of just dragging, so I ditched this one too because I was absolutely not a fan. Okay, I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm a like harsh reader of books on Goodreads, but like with that being said, I rarely give books 5 stars unless I like really loved them. I tend to give a lot to books 3 or 4 stars because I feel bad if I give it 2 unless I absolutely hated it. Like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, I think I gave 2 stars, but like all the other books that I just didn't like really love, I gave them 3 stars, except for Dumplin', which I think I gave 4. Well, now that I've given you my least favorite books of 2020, I'm going to give you my favorite books of 2020 to end it on a good note going into 2021. So I think my absolute favorite this year was Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I even started to annotate some of the pages because I literally loved it so much. Like, it was so good. I think I read this like after The Betrothed, after I DNF'd The Betrothed. So this was very good, and it still fits in that realm of royalty still. So if you don't know, the main character is the son of the first woman president of the United States, and he falls in love with the Prince of England, and it's just sort of about that. I definitely would recommend it to maybe like 16 or 17 up because there's some spice in there, but overall it's really good, and I literally love it so much. I'm actually on my way rereading it right now. I'm not that far in. I'm only like 70 pages in. But like, it's so good. It's so good. And then A House of Salt and Sorrows was my, like, it was a close second to Red, White, and Royal Blue. And it's a fairy tale retelling with the 12 dancing princesses, and it was so good, and it's a little on the spooky end. So I actually got COVID at the beginning of November, so this is what I read during that, and it was literally so amazing. Like, there were so many plot twists, and like, you just didn't know what was happening, and the main character is sort of an unreliable narrator, so that adds a lot to the plot, and you just don't know what's gonna happen, and it is so good. It was another 5-star read. And then Chain of Gold. This came out at the very beginning of 2020, and I was lucky enough to meet Cassandra Clare, and she signed it, which is absolutely insane. I still can't believe that I did that, but I'm so excited for Chain of Iron, which I think comes out in March. But it was so good, and even though it's really thick, which I appreciate for Cassandra Clare's books because I literally adore all of her characters so much, I'm really excited to get back into Edwardian era London and to see Anna Lightwood and James Herondale, and like, it's so good. I'm literally so excited. And it's just, the plot was good, all of the characters were good, and seeing like the original characters from Fertile Devices again, it was just a grand old time. This was my final 5-star read of 2020. I only gave 4 books 5 stars, so it's really thin, it's really tiny, and it's a novella from the Cruel Prince trilogy about Jude and Carden, who are the main characters, and it mainly follows Carden and like his past. And I don't know, it's not really, there's not a whole lot of plot there, but it was just sort of like a comfort read, especially after I read a lot of like kind of bad books that I just didn't wholly enjoy over Christmas break. So this one was a very nice break, and I don't know, I just loved it so much. And the illustrations in this book are literally so gorgeous. Like, you open it up and this is the first page. Like, what? I loved it so much. Okay, so that's basically my least favorite books and my favorite books of 2020, and including the ones that I DNF'd. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and you can like it and subscribe maybe if you enjoyed the video. I don't know when I'll be back because my posting schedule has been very consistent, but like I said, you can find me in the lovely world of book talk, and you can follow my Goodreads, and I'm also active on my Bookstagram account again, so if I'm not here, then I'm probably in one of those places. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you soon, maybe.